We're going to rebuild some irons my way. Welcome back to the McGolf Shop. Jim McCleary, most award certified club maker, club fitter. If you would, like and subscribe, and that way you get more of the videos when they drop. As you see flying all over here is icons to my other social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you would, visit me over there and you can see more of what's happening in the shop. Don from Michigan ran into an issue that he felt I could help him with. Again, we are going to be dealing with some Hogans. Not nearly the Hogans of old like you saw when I just, cleaned some up. These are just slightly newer versions of the same. Let's see if I can make that happen. There we go. Slightly new versions of the same. All right, and slightly newer models. It looks like Don's finding the center. If I can get you in here into this guy. Let's see. There we go. You see, he's right there. All right, so he says what's happened is, in a lot of cases, what people do is they'll buy some stuff off of eBay and cobble it together, or in this particular case, he took it to a big box store and he said the heads kept flying off. Okay. So he didn't have any faith in them, and he wanted them put together better. And he saw one of the videos, and he liked the spine and the flow, and he wanted to make sure everything was going on great. And I read a note that he sent me. And in the note, it said that the length was going to be an inch longer and all these other things that was going on with it. Well, I did some quick measuring, and they're standard length, not an inch over. So that prompted a phone call. So I made a phone call to Mr. Don. And he wants them an inch over, and he's like, oh, I got to replace the shafts. No, we're just going to extend them, which is part of this build. All right. The other one was, and I got to switch a shaft here, is they all came looking like this. All the shafts came looking like this. And you can see it's a shaft band, okay? And the shaft band is running the lengthwise. Now, they call this thing a shaft band for a reason, okay? And the reason is that this band is supposed to go this way, not this way, because on it says R200, R400. Now, yeah, I don't know who did that, but that's not right. And that's just all that is a cosmetic thing. So we're going to peel all these off because basically it looks stupid. And I've told Don that, and he was okay with it. Now, and that's what I'm trying to do now. I just got, it's an OCD thing, I guess. Never thought myself OCD, but maybe I am. Okay, so what we got to do in order to make this right is we got to tear them down to parade rest yet again, and then we got to put them back together. Now, this is not going to be frequency matching. This is not going to be any of that stuff. This is just putting the stuff back together in its proper format, okay? Proper format. And that's what we're going to do. So it's going to be a bit of an investigation. It's going to be a bit of a put together. It's going to be maybe a couple parts in this particular video series of taking them apart, putting them together. Maybe that's what we'll call it. How about that? Taking them apart, putting them together, parts 1 and 2. So that's what we're going to have to do. So we're going to talk about what we got to do to take them apart, and then we're going to talk about what we find and what you really need to look for when you're doing this at your home. Now, again, if you find that you start this project and you really like the clubs like Don did, that sometimes you just do get outside your depth, right? And okay. And if that happens, you can pack them up, send them us. We'll talk to you about what we can and cannot do, and help you get the clubs that you like underneath or in your bag, so you can enjoy golf. And that's really what this is all about, right? So let's take you over to the part where we're just going to start taking them apart, and we'll see what we find. All right, so we got the head taken apart, and it took about 3 or 4 cleanings with the drill on the inside. And it is now way better looking on the inside. We're going to see if we can get it in there for you. See how you can actually start to see inside there? That's light reflecting off of that, and that's what we want. What we want to see here is I did a little polishing on the outside, nothing major, but I got rid of a lot, and then this had a whole bunch of glue boogery stuff on the outside, which I took off and polished off so it looks a little cleaner. So that's what I'm going to do basically to all the clubs. We're going to go in there, we're going to dig out a lot of stuff. Looking at the 4-iron, I think we're in that same category. I'm going to heat it up and get all that stuff out, and then we're going to start the process. So use a little heat around the outside, twist it if you can. Typically don't be afraid on steel shafts and on chrome heads to get it warm, because you can always, clean these guys up. Now, painted surface is a different issue. You want to be very gentle with that and take it a little bit at a time so it'll come out, or just go straight to the puller. Okay, so let me finish these up, and then we'll talk about what we found after we took them all apart. All right, I'm down to my very last one. I want to make sure I showed you everything that we've done, because this is pretty much the worst one in the clan, and it's a special wedge that we're going to talk about a little bit later. However, when we take this one apart, it's full of goo, and you can see it in there again. It's sitting right in there. It's pretty filled with stuff, right? That's really what the problem is. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you what I've been doing all along, and I've been drilling out the bottom. To get all the epoxy off the bottom. I want all the epoxy off the bottom so I can get a good seat with the shaft. I've been using the hosel brush, and I've been using it in the opposite direction, as it tends to dig a little bit more out. The bristles tend to go that way. But I alternate. And I just keep going until it's all shining. Okay, now finally there's a whole bunch of glue booger right there, just a whole bunch, and I gotta get rid of it. Okay, little wipe down. All right, so it looks a ton better now. It looks like a real golf club again. I'm going to show you this. See how that's nice, and it's just really clear right now. And that's what we want. That's where we're starting it at. And this is an F wedge. An F wedge. Who ever heard of an F wedge? I don't know. I'm calling this like an alphabet wedge group here. Hogan was ahead of his time in a lot of things. I give him a lot of credit for the hybrid, and I give him a lot. This F wedge, I'm not even sure what the F would even stand for, but it's a gap wedge, right? It is a 50-degree club. So maybe that pitching wedge that you just wanted to have, but you had to have another one, and you wanted a different thing in it, because the E is the equalizer. The E is the pitching wedge, F is the gap wedge, and there is a sand wedge in this group. So it's pretty cool what we're seeing now. So what did I find so far? Well, I found, and let's see if I'm going to take you on a little trip here, and I'll let you see. You see all that stuff right there? That's all the stuff that came out of all those clubs. And that's a significant amount of glue, plus all that stuff, plus all that's on the floor. That's all that stuff that came out of the shafts, and it was popping out of the head. And then you've got that going right there. So there's an excessive amount of glue being used, and what that comes from is it's a technique where, and it's a common technique, as by the way, it's where you get all your glue and you mix it up, and then they swirl it around in here and they leave all that extra glue in there, and then they'll get on top of the shaft and then they'll just put it in there, and it actually acts as a little extra weight. Okay, I'm not saying it's wrong or indifferent, but that's a heck of a lot of glue. And epoxy works when it's really thin. It works its best. When you got a whole bunch in there, I don't, eventually it's going to cure, but I don't know why anybody would want to use all that amount. Sometimes you need to for weighting. Some people will do that. But as a whole, you want to keep it thin in the contact between the shaft and the hosel. And what it does, it just fills up the shaft. You saw me drilling it out, and that's just something we have to do. Now, why did I drill it out? Well, when you go to put this in, you're pushing, if you don't have a hole there, it's going to push air, and it's going to hydraulically want to push itself off if you don't release the air. So I always drill the hole out or give it a weep hole of some variety. All right, so now we've got them apart. Now I got to take the grips off, I'm going to measure everything, and then we'll talk about the assembly process. We interrupt this regularly scheduled video for a change in plans. The change of plans was, what we're talking about in this video is taking apart a set of clubs, putting them back together in a fashion that I would normally do that. However, using some of my super sleuth skills and putting on my super sleuth hat, we discovered that the shafts are incorrect. And you're going to see that towards the end. So what this has become is the second worst repair that we've done. And at no fault of the person that sent me the sticks, it's just that this is what happens. Now, I'm going to get on my soapbox just a tad. And, so this is what happens. Well, if I understand it correctly, Don bought some stuff from eBay with the idea that he was getting what he asked for. Okay. Didn't happen. And that's the risk of buying on eBay. That's the reason why pictures are so important and understanding the building. That's why that's so important. In this particular instance, that didn't work out. Because as you're getting ready to see here is that, now there are different designs in typical shafts, but right now what I did is I put together the series of shafts that I'm going to put in and the series of shafts that I took out. And what you're seeing is on the new shafts that there is a graduated line that kind of goes down to the bottom, and then it evens out because they're all for the wedges. And that is the way that I expect to see that done. Now, give or take a little bit, but pretty much that's what we're going to see, particularly in taper tip. Now, if you look at the other side is almost horizontal, and it's more of like a heartbeat, basically up and down, up and down. And that's not correct. And that's based on a couple of things. One, that could be hosel insertion, and you're also using the exact same shaft into each one and then switching and going to another shaft, which I explain later. The other part is, if you see in the back end, and if I go through the back side, that they've cut into the steps. And when you do that, the profile is completely gone. There's absolutely no way that they're going to feel the same. And that's the problem here. And we want these things to work for Don. So we've called him, and we're installing some new ones. So let's go back into the video and you'll see what happens. All right, now that we have all the heads are ready, and now we got to make the shafts ready, and the first one's taking off the grip. And we talked about this being club making, so there it is. So you use the hook blade in order to slice the grip so you can peel it like a banana and not hurt yourself. All right, that was a lot of work. So a lot of thing when you use the hook blade, it's not necessarily so much like that as it is. I like laying it just on top of the shaft so it rides the shaft and it gets underneath of it. That way you don't scar the paint, or at least not very much, and you can get through it. Now the next one is getting the tape off. Much like you activate it to put it on, we want to kind of activate it in a different way to take it off. I do this all over again. All right, about 10 seconds on each side with the heat gun. And again, what I like doing is splitting the top of it, because then it makes it easy to pull it away and you're all done. Now, I have seen where guys will do it one-handed and they'll use a propane torch to get this thing all hot, right? And when they want to take off a grip, they use that hook blade and they'll pull it away, push it away from them. I guess from a hook blade point of view, it's actually safer. However, it's safer because you only have one hand controlling it, where you have the project that is solid and you're pulling towards you and it's a hook blade. That's the whole reason for it. And so they pull across and they rip it off just like you said, but it's all but one hand. You get more torque you get more power, more torque with both hands more than one. I just think it's better to work on a stable project than having to hold it and you're like that. Just an opinion. It's not wrong, good, or in between. It's just what it is. Again. So, on my way to the glue bar, which is like 3 steps away, I noticed something was getting a little different as I was putting these clubs together. And 2 things were happening. One, the heads were getting kind of jostly, and which kind of goes with, hey, the clubs are falling off, the heads are coming off. And because typically in taper tip, they tend to fit very well. You know, there's not a whole lot of room for wiggle. It's very rare. And so I was like, well, okay. And in between that, when we're talking about using all that glue, well, I was in between. I was cleaning the inside. Watch this. Ugh, right? So I was cleaning the insides of the tips as well as the end. And what had happened was I noticed 2 things. One is the butt sections were not marrying up. Normally they're pretty close to one another, and it wasn't happening. And 2, when I was down at the bottom end of the set, this is a wedge. This came out of one of the wedges, so either the pitching wedge or even the G wedge. This is over 15 inches long. All right, in a wedge, that doesn't happen. To kind of give you a case in point, this is a brand spanking new one. This one hasn't been cut. This is a dynamic gold as well. And this is for a 5 iron, okay, a 5 iron. And this thing is only that far, which came out to be something along the lines of right at 10 or 11 inches. So the tip section was 4 inches longer than the 5 iron, all right? When you get down to low end, the tip section is going to be smaller, and that's how they do the constant weight in these things. That's a problem. And and then again, in my own suspicion is that as they get shorter, the shafts get a little fatter and they fit in the hosels a little bit better at the lower end, where they're a little thinner at the top. It could be just the fit, whatever, but that's what keyed me off. So then I looked again, and I started looking, and they cut the butt sections to the point they were cutting through the butt sections. And that's going to make these shafts perform even worse. So basically what it looks like happened here is Don got a set of shafts from somebody that bought some, like, let's just say they start at 40 and a half, right? Or even, 40 and a half, somewhere in that range, and bought 4 or 5 of them and put them in the 3 through the 6 or 3 through the 5, probably 3 through the 6, and put them in there and just cut them down. And then got the next half a step shorter shaft for the entire rest of them and kept cutting them down even more. So basically they put a 3 iron shaft or even a 2 iron shaft in the 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then took a 4 iron shaft and put it in the 7, 8, 9 wedge. And so what's that going to do? Well, that's going to make the top end will probably play okay, but the bottom end is going to play like a big bucket of poo, and that's not what we want. So here it is. It's 6:45. I just got off the phone with Don, told him what I found, and he wanted to know what to do. And I said, well, the reality, if you want them right, you're going to reshaft them with something else. And so we decided on some KBS 105s because he wants to go an inch longer. When you go an inch longer, that's a significant amount of heft that's out there, even with 120. And I convinced him to go to the 105s so that it would feel better in a total weight scenario, not necessarily this big monster heavy weight. Now it's still going to weigh, But the idea here is he's a slightly older golfer. I said, so let's loosen up the weight a little bit so that you can be as good at the end as you are at the beginning. And that's what we're doing. So we're on pause. We're on pause, wait, because we got to go order the shafts and we got to bring them in. And then we'll talk about gluing. And hopefully by that time, I might have a surprise for you. So we'll have to see how that works out. So stay with me. We're going to continue this on another time frame. And so that's, this could be one of those worst repair job kind of videos now instead. So we're just learning all kinds about what we get here in the shop. So when we get them in here, we'll talk about putting them back in line and we'll go through the same process. So give me a couple days.